When I did By Hook or By Crook, we were really, so that was we shot it in 1999, and I've had friends who transitioned in like 1991, 92, and they would come. I had a cafe called the Bearded Lady Cafe, and it was a bunch of us that had it, and a lot of writers and filmmakers would come there, and a lot of my friends who were transitioning then that couldn't, there wasn't really a hangout, like a lot of the gay bars were not very trans inclusive. And so we would all hang out there, and that's kind of the group of us that made By Hook or By Crook, and we were really into this, like, different gender being expressed, obviously. So I think that what it's given me, even before I transitioned, is this way of viewing the world that it really embraced the paradox of life, right? That things can be contradictory things, and that was, like, a lot, which maybe is why I enjoyed filmmaking, because filmmaking does well with conflict, like looking at conflict and looking at things that were... So I felt very comfortable, not with being confrontational conflict, but comfortable with understanding that things are complicated and conflict is a part of myself relating to my body or who I am or how the world saw me or how, So I think it gives me this point of view, and filmmaking is all about a point of view. That's what makes a filmmaker separate. Like, you could all go and take a camera and shoot the same 2 dialogue page scene, and if I said nothing about how you had to cast or what the background of the story was, you would all make completely different scenes from that, because that's our point of view. So I think that is exactly how it's influenced me. I think there's still a lot of media, I'm going to say media, and when I'm saying it, more like mass media, or like, there's the film industry, and then there's the television industry, and then there's internet, trying to understand how to tell stories like TV and film. But I guess I feel like that because there's so many opportunities, and because people are getting to choose stories a little more because of the internet, they're getting to say, hey, I want to see this, and I want to see that kind of story, and there's just more visibility that's breaking down some level, not all, but some level of ignorance. That, following the story that you want to tell, and I don't know, I feel like there's just room for us to tell our stories without the burden of representing something the way we're supposed to. And when I first started making films, I felt like, it has to be good PR, because, like, there's only these many stories, but what if I want to tell a story about a character who's a liar and is a grifter and kind of turns their life around, like, so to not sanitize our stories, right? So to tell what you want to tell, whether that's, like, happy ending, sad ending, whatever, but to do it from what you connect to, and rather than what you think you have to, right? That's all, because it's like really, I don't know how to stir someone's emotions unless I'm really committed to the story. But it can be scary sometimes to take risks with the kind of stories that we're telling. I transitioned while I was at film school, or like shortly after, so I transitioned late in life, I lived as a masculine presenting person. I passed a lot until I talked, and then, or I would often, like, help people figure me out quicker or raise my voice higher, anything to just, like, put people at their ease, I wasn't really into, had people having a hard time with my gender. I just wanted it to not get awkward, But it was really interesting to go from San Francisco, where I lived in, like, a queer trans bubble, to go to school down here, and really connect to my filmmaker friends. Like, they got me. They weren't, like, it was fine. But then I had to write companies I worked for, so I was like, oh, this is, they were all awesome about it. Actually, the only the few people, and I asked them to update their blogs and stuff about, my director and the pronouns, they were all, and I took a light approach. I was like, everything's the same, except, I got some sideburns or whatever, but feel free to ask me any questions. I was also very inviting, with them, and that worked for me, and I think it's also so easy to just be very formal about it, and everybody was great. The only blog I had the hardest time with was a LGBT blog that was just big and was bought by a company that's owned by Viacom, and it took, like, for 2 years I wrote them and they wouldn't respond. And I don't mind, like, I'm very out, but I also want to choose that, and this is, like, one of their articles was, like, the top hit on my name, and it was not giving me a chance to, like, out myself. And anyway, they finally did, but it was interesting because the film industry people were great. socially it was great. I mean, among my friends, the reason I wanted to transition was also I saw a transgender, transsexual community that was very diverse in terms of its expression, and so I felt like I have a friend, who transitioned and became, transitioned from female to male, but then once they became male, they became very feminine, and so, I love that. I'm like, that's not my trajectory, but I kind of love that world of, because my early 90s, we were all just, everyone, there wasn't as many people, so we were all hanging out together. Any of us outsiders, we were all in it together, and there was such a diversity of expression. So it wasn't confusing in terms of my community, but I think it was confusing in terms of the ways that you go from living queer in one way, where I never had to out myself. I was outed every step I took, but my partners were usually femme and not being ID'd as queer, and then when I transitioned, I had to out myself, I think gender's really confusing, and that's why I love it. I love that it's not simple. I love that it's not everyone. I love that everyone has their own relationship to it, and I think sometimes it can be painful though, because it's the words don't fit. There's not enough words really for gender expression, and anyway, that's a very long ramble. I'll let you figure out.